Well, hello everyone, and welcome to TravMedia Meets. I'm Henry Hemming, Global Managing Director of TravMedia. So this is our first event of 2024, and what a start to the year as we welcome 4 top UK travel editors, arguably our strongest lineup of talent in TravMedia Meets history, as they disclose their thoughts on travel in this year ahead. Yeah, it's time for our Travel Editors Predictions of the Year webinar. We're going to find out what destinations will prevail, what travel categories will soar, what the purchasing patterns may look like, and what curveballs our wacky world may lob into the mix. We certainly live in interesting times. So here is our star-spangled lineup. We welcome Ben Ross, Head of Travel, The Telegraph. Ben, great to have you here. And we welcome Cathy Adams, Senior Commissioning Editor, Travel, at the Times and Sunday Times, Senior Commissioning Travel Editor, The Times and Sunday Times. Mark Palmer, Travel Editor, Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday. And Tom Robbins, Travel Editor of the Financial Times. Welcome to all our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us. So the way it's going to work is we're going to go around the team in turn, asking them to give their overview of the year ahead. Before we get stuck in, if you've got questions for the panelists, then do hit us with them using the Q&A button. Please, as I always say, please do put in your company name with your question, just in case I don't know who you are. We have had quite a few questions in advance, which is simply smashing. And we love to see your thoughts on social. We're at TravMedia_UK, and I'm sure you know our panelists' handles. We love to see your posts and blogs. So putting this simply, is 2024 going to, by any chance, be a repeat of 2023? Or what challenges may stand in the way of another bumper harvest following our sector's epic bounce back last year? Will the cost of living continue to dampen the overall picture? Will sustainability play a bigger and bigger role in media output? What's going to be deemed hot, not new, old? We're about to find out. So the person who has volunteered kindly to go first with her thoughts is Cathy Adams, Senior Commissioning Travel Editor of The Times. Cathy has written about everything from travel to parenting for some of the world's top magazines, newspapers. She was formerly Travel Editor of The Independent and Evening Standard, and a stint working for an airline magazine in Hong Kong has given her a lifelong love of Asia. So, Cathy, you've checked the Ouija board and tarot cards. What are your predictions for the year ahead?
Okay, so hi everyone, thanks so much for joining. I think first of all, I just want to sort of set a scene. So this morning, my colleague Liz Edwards and I, you know, lots of you will know Liz Edwards, we were filming at a Premier Inn on Borough High Street. So don't ever say travel journalism is not glamorous. Premier Inns are wonderful places to be. We were filming a little debate about baked beans, would you believe? Because she wrote a column at the end of last year. I wrote a column also at the end of last year, both defending hotel breakfast, and Liz saying how much she hates baked beans. They don't belong in an English breakfast, you know, absolutely awful things to have on a plate. And obviously Premier Inn, hopefully some of you will have seen that kind of wonderful bean barrier plate that they've unveiled. Anyway, so this, yeah, Tom, you can see the footage later. So this is kind of, I suppose, encapsulates a couple of things I want to talk about. Number one, video. Of course, everything we do and we think about now, it has to have a video, and we have to think about how we're storytelling to new audiences, and that sometimes involves, you know, us coming up with an idea here. It involves, you know, using staff members. I don't want to call myself talent, but why not? I'm going to call myself talent. You know, and it involves just having fun as well, and I think that's something that we are really trying to focus on, and definitely that readers want to hear about. It's all of our fun stories that are really performing well for us. So I'm talking first person stuff, you know, just people going out and having a light-hearted time. Like we were talking briefly before the call started about Icon, Royal Caribbean's new cruise ship. So I went on it last week, and oh my God, it's the absolute epitome of fun. I mean, it really is supercharging, you know, the family holiday. And I think that's what consumers want. You know, it's been a real miserable couple of years, and they're after something fun, and I'm hoping when this Premier Inn bean debate video goes live, you know, you guys are going to agree. So that's my first point. But then on the flip side, this year obviously there is a lot of things we need to be worried about. So war in the Middle East, readers are concerned, to say the least, especially with things happening over the past weekend in Jordan. They're worried about places like Dubai. Geographically they're not far away. Sorry, geographically they are far away, but people are still quite worried. I mean, I was reading a Mumsnet thread, and I must be probably the only travel journalist that reads Mumsnet, but it's a really good source of information and stories, I find. So reading Mumsnet, and there was a long thread about somebody wanting to cancel their holiday in Greece based on kind of encroaching war in the Middle East. Now, we might all laugh and say, well, they're miles away from each other, both kind of literally and metaphorically, but actually people are worried. So I think that's something that, we need to take into consideration. Obviously, it's a big year for elections. Don't make me name them, but it is a big year for elections this year. I think that there's more elections this year than in any other calendar year. And I think that's going to see increased instability generally in kind of booking patterns and the way that people are looking where to go. What else? I mean, I don't want to talk about COVID, that's awful, but we are sort of seeing as well a return to mask wearing. I was in Greece a few weeks ago and was staggered actually at the number of people wearing masks on public transport. I reckon it was 50% on public transport, which now is kind of anathema to us, isn't it? I hate masks. I never want to go back there. But people in Greece, Spain are, thinking again, well, let's wear masks because there's been a COVID resurgence. Hoping that's not going to be a thing. Also, hot weather. Everyone's going to say this, but it's going to be really hot this summer, and people are therefore looking to Scandinavia, the Netherlands, Scotland. I mean, last summer I went to Scotland and the Netherlands, just as the TUI CEO predicted we all would holiday, and I had a brilliant time because the weather was absolutely phenomenal. I think it was late 20s in Inverness in kind of late September. And I went to The Hague in July, gorgeous weather, a really, really good place to go, I think, in summer. And that's something we're going to see a bit more. I'm realizing I'm talking here. So anyone jump in, if you have something that you want to add. Trains as well. We briefly touched upon this, and I think train travel is going to start. I think there are a few questions, weren't there, about trains? I think train travel is going to become increasingly important. It is affordable if you know how to make it work. And I think that's the most important thing. I went to Paris just this past weekend. I've got a son and he's 3. Eurostar is free. People that have kids under 4, Eurostar is free until they turn 4. They do have to sit on your lap, but it's a great option for families and it's much more stress-free. I found myself being a really nervous flyer in the past couple of months. Had a terrible, turbulent experience, and I'm sure various people will agree with me. But yeah, I'm increasingly loath to take planes anywhere. So train travel, I'm hoping, is going to be my savior in the next kind of few years. And last but not least, to sort of round off generally what we're doing, evergreen content. I mean, it's becoming more and more important, and we're investing a lot in evergreen content. However you want to talk about it, evergreen content, service journalism, sort of we're answering questions that people want to know, basically. We are giving the reader literally what they want to know, and we know this via search patterns. So that's always something I think to bear in mind. We don't commission just based on search patterns, and we never would. I think a journalist's instinct is still incredibly important, but it's a helpful tool to have, and we put a lot of work into, our sort of updating our evergreen content, essentially, around big destinations that we know British travellers are buying and travelling to. So, have I gone for 5 minutes already? I can't actually tell, but I hope that's given a very kind of whistle-stop tour, but happy to speak about anything more in detail.
Terrific. Great way to get the ball rolling, Cathy. Thank you. And we've got further questions on a couple of the areas you raised, which is terrific and lovely to hear that the Great British Breakfast is alive and kicking.
Definitely.
We turn to Mark Palmer, travel editor, Daily Mail and Mail on Sunday, who is one of the longest serving travel editors in the country, having joined the Mail, the UK's highest circulation national daily newspaper, some 15 years ago. Truly a veteran, doesn't look like a veteran, but truly a veteran of Fleet Street, having worked variously at the Evening Standard, the Sunday Telegraph, and Daily Express, author of 2 books on football and Clark shoes, divides his time between London and when he can flee the Scottish borders, and his list of banned words for journalists and PRs is a matter of industry legend. So Mark, you're leading the largest paper's travel output. How will your column inches get shared in 2024?
Well, hello everybody, and thank you very much for having me, Henry. And I don't think I got too much to add on the baked bean debate, Cathy, but I like a baked bean, that's for sure. And in fact, somebody suggested we should do a whole thing about breakfast buffets around the world, where you can find the best breakfast buffets, because I always think the breakfast is the best meal of the day when you're on holiday in a sort of big hotel. Anyway, I just want to say that I think that the ability of the kind of travel industry to bounce back, or perhaps it's the ability of the travel industry to speak itself up, is phenomenal. And I think everybody should take a big bow, because whatever seems to happen in the world, we get these figures come out. You know, for example, I think the 14 million people in this country have already booked a holiday in 2024. And the air travel, I think, is set to reach a record 4.7 billion worldwide, that is. So despite what's going on in the world, it seems to be that travel is important. I think that I just want to touch briefly on cruising, because it's a massive market for us at the Mail and Mail on Sunday. I think the figure for that is something like 36 million people are due to cruise this year. Again, that's a worldwide figure, but that's up 6% on last year. And it's very difficult for me to kind of break all that down without looking at the whole travel world through the prism of our particular readers. And our readers tend to be over 50, over 55, kind of conservative with a big C and a small c, I suppose. And I think that one of the reasons that that cruising is so huge, and why for us the advertising that we get in from cruise companies is so massive, is because the cruise companies more and more are kind of looking after their passengers, in the sense that even picking them up from home. More and more cruises now start in Southampton, so you don't have to fly anywhere. And I think that is a trend that's going to very much continue, you know, throughout this year. I think Cathy touched on the way temperatures are sort of changing and things are different, and I completely agree with that. And we're seeing more and more of a kind of demand for information about the shoulder seasons. And I've long thought that, and I was in southern Spain in last October, it was, I think, sort of middle of October, and it was fabulous. I mean, it was really hot, not oppressively hot. The sea was still lovely and warm. There were far fewer people around, and I think that is going to be really interesting how the travel industry, how it kind of relates to that. We've already seen that TUI and Jet2 and all that putting on more flights this year, and a lot of those new flights are actually in the spring and in the autumn, and extending the season longer, which I guess is good news. It's particularly good news for our readers, who, a lot of them, who their children have left home, and so they are free to travel at all kinds of different times of the year. The only other thing I just wanted to say by way of sort of introduction is that things are changing rather dramatically at the Mail as we move behind this partial paywall.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Ben Ross about this last week when we met up somewhere, and how we are now going sort of full blast down the digital highway, which other papers have been doing for some time. And more now, I get every morning, I get an email from our digital people, who all seem to be aged about 18 or 19, telling me exactly which stories have had the most clicks and most page views and all that. So we're very much going down that route, which means that we will be changing, and already are changing, the content in the paper, and indeed the content online. So that's just all I wanted to say by way of introduction. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mark. Lots to mull over there. If I can ask you, with questions upcoming, if you can keep close to the microphone, that's when we were hearing you best. But that's a great overview. Thank you very much. Ben Ross, we turn to you next. Lovely to have you back. You were here with us this time last year. Ben Ross, head of travel for the Telegraph. Ben began writing about travel in 2001, becoming travel editor of The Independent in 2007, head of travel for The Independent and Independent on Sunday thereafter, joined the Telegraph in 2014, and is responsible for all of the Telegraph's travel content, print and online, that online word again. Ben, what trends are likely to keep your team of writers feverishly busy in the year ahead?
There are almost too many to mention at this point. But I mean, certainly last year, and for a short haul perspective, and indeed a little bit to long haul, over tourism was a big theme. And I think that will still be something that occupies our time and our readership this year. It always proves a sort of interesting debating point. And I think it is sort of huge relevance to tourism. I'm really interested to see how the Venice entry fee pans out, which seems a sort of strangely sort of nebulous way of dealing with tourism. I'm not quite clear what the intentions and motives are of that, so that'll be interesting. I think some of those destinations that people would occasionally worry about in terms of tourism, you know, the Canary Islands, for example, I sort of feel that's swung back into consciousness really well, and they're really differentiating their offer. And certainly in the survey that we did earlier this year, which I can provide a link for further down in the chat, the Canary Islands and mainland Spain really do seem to be still incredibly popular and working incredibly well. Mallorca and Tenerife as well, top destinations as they always are. And I think the rest of the Med still feels like it's really, really going to be popular this summer, with the caveats, of course, about the temperatures, which I think we'll get onto shortly. Greece, you know, really badly affected by wildfires last summer, still incredibly popular amongst tour operators, the Isles in particular, obviously. Turkey, I think this could be the year of Turkey. It's had an awful start last year, obviously, with the appalling earthquake, but it just feels like everything is coalescing around that being an important destination, not from a budget point of view, as well as in terms of airlift. I think that will be huge. I'd be genuinely interested to see how the Olympics affects France this year. There was a sort of slight feeling that might put people off because too many people are going, and hotel prices in Paris will be too expensive and things. But then, I don't know if you saw the report this morning, British residents have had more tickets for the Olympic Games than any other country other than France itself. So that's, you know, it could well do terribly well. Italian destinations, we're seeing a lot of interest in Italy still. So, and then maybe some of the less sort of obvious ones. We've got a lot of interest in Bologna and Milan and Sardinia as well. So that could be an interesting destination element. What else? From a long haul point of view, Cathy touched on the fact that there's been concerns about the Middle East. I think that's absolutely inevitable. Of course, that's the case. We've seen still a lot of interest in Dubai, which feels like the sort of most mainstream destination people fly to. Obviously, it's got the capabilities of being a very useful hub for people. So I think it's still that. I think that still is of fundamental interest for people heading east, of course. And I think I wonder a little bit whether from an environmental perspective, long haul might become more interesting as longer holidays, perhaps more complex holidays, making sure you're spending more time if you are going to commit to a long haul flight, and making sure that you're maybe making a more interesting itinerary, connecting up different countries, spending a little bit. Certainly our audience who has a bit more time on their hands, you know, much like Mark was saying, you know, these are people whose lives have developed to the point where they have the potential to travel at different times of year. I think that could be interesting this year. We ran a lovely piece a couple of weeks ago on South Korea. A writer who has a great fondness of K-drama, which is not a genre I'm particularly au fait with, like K-pop, but more dramery. It inspired a huge response from our readers, and it did feel like as though people were snapping back into focus in Southeast Asia and Asia itself after a sort of slower evolution after the pandemic. I wonder whether that's going to be something that really sort of really becomes a sort of area of focus this year. And it's like Japan, of course, you know, I think that's going to have an amazing year, and all the tour operators we've been speaking to have seen a huge rise in interest in Japan. And I think all of that area, Thailand was slow to recover in terms of tourism numbers. I think that will all be big. I saw the news this morning about the pound gaining in value. I guess value is going to be important, and I think things pegged to the US dollar, which is often complex, becomes difficult from our point of view. US content does enormously well for us, and we can't write too much about the US, but equally, I think there are going to be inherent problems about tipping and the cost involved in going on a visit to the US, which I think we'll have to be cognizant of. But as I say, I don't think it will detract from the desire of particularly telegraph readers to get out there. There's a huge wodge of interest for that. Cruise, which Mark touched on, really important. I think important for a younger demographic as well. It provides great value when it comes to holidaying, and I think that will be a focus for us in 2024. I don't think we're as an audience, our readers are particularly invested in new to cruise stories, because they are cruisers. They fundamentally do that a huge amount. So it's going to be a question of making sure that they do the right sort of cruise, or the cruise that's going to give them the best benefit as a holiday maker. We always see a huge amount of interest in luxury travel. I think there's a vicarious thrill to seeing how the 1% live, or 1% travel, and people really enjoy that. Just sort of going behind the curtain of really high-end travel. So I mean, we'll certainly cover on with that. And sort of speaking of luxury travel, the hyper luxury hotels, they always arouse enormous interest. Last year, I was really pleased with the coverage we have of the opening of the OWO. We did a huge amount of that, and Tom obviously did a fantastic opening piece on that, which I think everyone thought was absolutely brilliant. So well done, Tom, for that. But I mean, there's lots of new luxury stuff, Six Senses, Rosewood, and I think that sort of stuff really chimes with our readership. They really enjoy getting their teeth into that. So I suppose just to close, sort of thematic stuff. We've all mentioned this. Obviously, off-season shoulder season travel. It does feel like it's going to become increasingly important. We wrote a huge amount about it last year. Temperature's an effect here, and I think people are beginning to see if they can stretch the envelope of what constitutes the main season for traveling. I mean, as married to a teacher as I am, I will never be able to explore the edges of the summer holiday. But I do think there is a real benefit for lots of readers to be able to try and get out to Europe in particular in May, and perhaps in September as well. And we'll certainly cover that off again this year. I think it's going to be terribly important. The sheer heat of a Mediterranean summer at the moment is something that people need to be cognizant of. Multi-gen holidays, I think, still really, really important for our audience. Certainly, I'm always interested to hear good stories along those lines. And then we've got the value piece as well, cost of living. I don't think anyone should ignore the fact that people may be finding it hard to afford the holidays that they perhaps want to go on, and being able to offer value alternatives, instead of this, do this, I think is a really, really good way in. I've also been really thrilled recently about some of the content that we've done about the return of the high street travel agent. I do think, and Cathy made this point as well, people do want advice. They want answers to things. It's not all about inspiration. We at the Telegraph have been really at the forefront of offering evergreen content for a long time, and I do think it's something, as Cathy points out, that a readership really, really values, and I hope that everyone in the sort of travel media industry gets on board with that. It's terribly, terribly important that we can deliver that sort of thing to readers. I think that's just about it. Ski, no one's touched on ski. We're in the middle of a ski season, but I mean, so it's quite tricky. Our readers absolutely love it, and they want to know about guaranteed snow more than anything else. So again, I guess that folds into the climate change discussion, but we've seen lots of interest in sort of lesser known destinations, the Scandi options, and again, I guess Japan is, that's the sort of dream. Wow, imagine that powder idea. And then, the UK, we haven't really touched on the UK, although, sorry, Cathy mentioned Scotland. I mean, I do think there is a huge interest in just the classic bits of a British holiday. It could be the Cotswolds or the Lake District. People really, really want to know about the good places that they can travel and gain an insight into the island we live on. I think that's it. Does that do?
Terrific, categoric and comprehensive, Ben. We couldn't have asked for more. That's wonderful. Thanks for hitting on another great survivor to the baked bean, and that is the British travel agent. That's lovely to hear. and I think they're doing very, very well indeed. Yes, you mentioned 6- and 7-star hotels coming on board, and our final panelist, Tom Robbins, slept in a room that was Churchill's room at the OWO and wrote a lovely piece about it. So we're on to Tom Robbins, travel editor of the FT, the Financial Times, has been travel editor since 2010. Previously travel editor of the Observer and an investigative reporter at the Sunday Times. Travel Journalist of the Year at the British Press Awards in 2023 and Travel Writer of the Year at a certain TravMedia Awards in 2022. Tom, lovely to have you here. What are your thoughts on this extraordinary travel year ahead?
Thank you very much, Henry. Thanks for having me. And thank you for reading my article. I thought it was only my mother who read my pieces, so that's very nice to hear. I did want to start with luxury hotels, actually, because in my mind, the thing I'm thinking about more than previous years probably is price. And I'm lucky that our FT readers are probably richer than any other newspaper as an average. So over the years, I've thought very little about covering super luxury hotels. So lights have just gone off in here. As an example, back the year I started here, the big hotel story was the reopening of the Savoy after a massive refurb. They spent 220 million on it, and no other hotel had ever done that at the time. And the starting price for rooms there that year was £350, which, allowing for inflation, would be just over £500 now. But the OWO, that hotel in London that you mentioned, starting price for really quite a small room is £1,200 a night. The Peninsula is £1,300 a night. There's plenty of others. The sort of ballpark now is over £1,000 for a 5-star London hotel, which is absolutely unheard of even 2 years ago. And so we're seeing this kind of what they call a bifurcation, where the markets are splitting, where there's still a very price conscious mid-market, and at the top end the prices are just going up and up and up. And I think from my point of view, it's not that people can't afford this. Obviously they can. These hotels are full and they're doing well. The problem is the tone of it, really. That if most readers are thinking, that's insane, that's a disgusting amount of money to spend on a relatively small room in London, then it sort of just changes the feel of the article, and you don't really want the first 50 comments below the line to be, get out of it, you're mad. So there's a sort of a question to me about how much we just sort of gaily plow on with just thinking always what's the most incredible story we can cover without worrying about the cost. And I think perhaps it's doing a bit of what I think Mark was talking about of seeing behind the curtain. That's still fine to do that, but just being aware of the cost. Also, there's a sort of wider sense of slight uncertainty about the luxury world right now. Earlier this month, about 2 weeks ago, the shares in Watches of Switzerland, which is the big Rolex retailer, it's part of Rolex, but it's their retail arm, the shares went down a third in a week when they issued a profit warning. And a lot of people were like, oh, that's it, the luxury sector is in trouble. But then LVMH profits last week were really good. So I don't think we know, but whereas last year and the previous year, there was just this sense of, luxury is absolutely booming as never before. I think there's a bit more caution around now. So again, it's just, I would hesitate a bit more about doing a adventure travel week's trip that costs £35,000, whereas once I might not have thought about it twice. I think the balance is key, probably. And even, Condé Nast Traveller have been doing much more of these value hotels, that Strand called cheapest, nicest hotel. So even they are sort of aware of there needs to be some consideration of doing better value coverage. I wanted to mention about story. types of stories. You know, PRs are always asking me, what kind of stories will you commission? And you know, when I started, I think there was a sort of standard in the travel industry of majority of stories, articles being of the sort of glorious Marrakesh or wonderful Tuscany type pieces, without any real clear sense of why they're in the newspaper right now. You know, the conventional news values, something has to have happened, there must be a trend, there must be a new opening, whatever. And I think that's changed more and more people are sort of seeing the value of having that kind of story. But I think it's been really supercharged in the last 2 years by the use of social media, and the fact that sharing stories on social media has become, you know, a really main way of getting readers to your stories. And if you see something on Twitter or Instagram, you know, the picture can't do that much work, and there's no real way of saying, oh, this is a lovely place to go for your holidays. You know, a long preamble. You have to explain in 10 words, you know, why this should be read now. And what's happened is that a lot of people are still commissioning stories in the same way, but then at the last minute thinking, how are we going to make this saleable on social media, and crowbarring in you know, something like, is this the best hotel in France or whatever, you know. So I think probably as PRs and journalists, we have to just think ever more clearly, you know, what is the angle that's going to sell this story on social media, right from the start, when we're starting to think about setting up a trip. Sustainability has been mentioned a few times, and you know, it's weird. It's such a long-standing issue. You know, again, you know, at the Observer 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we commissioned someone to go around the world without flying. And nothing's changed. We all know all the issues, except obviously the weather's getting hotter, and you know, this summer maybe there'll be another 40+ degree heat wave in London, and I think that kind of changes how you treat it. I mean, you can't, you know, the travel pages can't be separate to the front pages and the rest of the newspaper during that period. You know, and you can't have a story about a long haul flight to the Maldives or whatever without, you know, the implication of how those two stories are linked. You know, the heat wave on the front page, and then the travel story with a massive carbon emission within the same paper. That's just too uncomfortable. And so I think that has to be thought of. I mean, I'm a great believer in the value of travel, and that, you know, the carbon cost can be justified, but I think it has to be thought about, and we can't just sort of think, oh, we're operating in a separate world because we're in a travel section. Although there's this huge disparity around that as well. You know, I recently met with the boss of a travel company who said they'd surveyed all their customers about what was important to them, and they went into it thinking, you know, sustainability would be top of the list because that's what gets talked about so much. And actually the overwhelming response, in his words, was that his customers just did not give an F star. So there is, you know, people have very different feelings about it. It's massively polarizing, and you'll see, you know, below the line comments about cruising, for example, you know, there will be a very large number of them saying, you know, you should be marched to jail for doing this. So that's I haven't got an answer to that at all, obviously, but it's just very much in my mind when commissioning things. I do turn down stories because it doesn't seem justifiable from a sort of sustainability point of view. In terms of destinations, I mean, I think there was a sense of post-pandemic of people coming back to old faithful destinations, and Italy and Greece were absolutely booming over the last 2 years. I think probably now people are ready to look further afield to more adventurous places, you know, Peru, maybe South America. I haven't commissioned much about South America for years, Eastern Europe. But then my other thing I always plead to people is that I get 10 pitches about Ethiopia's lower Omo Valley for every one I do about France or the Dordogne or regular destinations, you know. And the real premium for me is always a new way of doing some familiar destination where people actually want to go, you know. So something new in Tuscany would be amazing. So yeah, Olympics, Ben mentioned, it's going to definitely be a lot of column inches this year. Wider industry trend, I think we're going more and more towards greater regulation. You know, tourism is this vast industry, you know, whatever, 10% of world GDP, almost completely unregulated. And as over-tourism becomes more and more thought about, that's going to lead to more sort of attempts to manage tourism. Mentioned Venice's tax, which is so small, I don't think it'll do anything. Paris has massively hiked its hotel taxes, but even to things like, you know, there's a load of hikes in the US, you have to enter a lottery to get a ticket in order to do them. And that kind of attempt at sort of managing crowds, I think we're going to see a lot more of. Other thing just to mention is hotels evolving into being more sort of lifestyle destinations rather than just a place to sleep and eat. We don't have that much of it in the UK at the moment, but it's, you know, very big in countries like Austria, where, you know, there's a spa, there's a full activities, there's, you know, your destination is your hotel, and I think we're going to see a lot more properties developing that kind of offering over the next couple of years. So I'll wind up there for a bit of discussion, and I'll go and turn the lights on again, so you might be able to see me better.
Do that, Tom. Fantastic. That was fascinating. Thank you so much for that overview. And while Tom delivers light, I'm going to start going through the questions. I mean, we've had an extraordinary overview, really, of the year ahead. We could call it quits right there, but I'm not going to let you. We've had lots of questions in advance. I'm going to have to consolidate some of these, but I want to give as many people a shout out as possible. So 3 that I think I can bring together on the issue of when do we travel. Tracy Poggio at UK Head of Media Marketing Gibraltar says, given the possibility of new patterns of med vacations being switched earlier in the year or later, you know, how do the panelists judge the mood of the public on this issue? Obviously, the word families possibly comes up there. Maxime Wiemans, press officer of Belgian Tourist Office Wallonia, says effectively TUI helped do us a massive favour in terms of media coverage, talking about the expectation of a rise in demand for holidays in spring and autumn and a focus on new trips to Northern Europe. What do the panelists think? And then at the other side of the world, Naomi Pedlow, PR and Communications Manager for Tourism Queensland, says, how do you think the shoulder season will impact travel coverage as we move forward? So with a thought to Belgium and Gibraltar and Australia, who would like to tackle that first? Mark, do you have a thought just to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, well, as I said in my sort of introduction there, I think that the seasons are all changing, and on the one hand, I suppose that's worrying because it's further evidence of climate change. At the same time, if you're not locked into school holidays and you've got more time, then it's wonderful because you can go to these places, you know, what traditionally would be sort of almost out of season, and have an amazing time. And I think that's I think all travel companies they seem to be sort of pushing that. You know, it's always whether you're a small hotel in the UK or there's always that concern about, you know, the dead days of sort of January, February, and similarly in the autumn. And that's changing. And I think that from a sort of newspaper perspective, what I'm interested in is real, this is the sort of buzzword, you know, news you can use, but how actually to do that? Where can you go in? I mean, not all of Greece is on limits in sort of October. You know, flights I think they stop at a certain point. So where can I go, and how can I get there, where I'm going to have going to be priced properly, fewer people, and still lots of things to do. And I think there's a lot of information out there which I'd like to sort of get hold of, so that we can sort of better inform our readers about those shoulder seasons.
Yeah. And Cathy, are you beginning to look at where tour operators are potentially changing their holiday programs, their inclusive tour programs? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I think that's when you're going to get the real consumer behavior. It's when, giants like TUI, for example, as Sebastian Abel, I think, said last year, wasn't it, that we're all going to be going to Netherlands and Belgium. I mean, they actually have to start flying there. They have to start, setting up programs there, because I think until that happens, people are still going to end up going to Spain and Greece. But we've definitely seen a real shift in reader behavior, towards going to these, Mediterranean places, but in winter. So, people going to Madeira, people going to Greece. And as Mark said, obviously, it isn't always possible to go to Greece in October, although I think that is changing in Greece. Greece's opening months, if you like, they have been extended kind of, I think, even into November. I think TUI will actually get you there in November, which is quite mad. So yeah, I think it's going to take a long time, though, and I think you actually do need some big players to come out and properly run a big schedule. I mean, in places like Bulgaria and the Black Sea coast as well. I mean, I think that is probably cooler over there, but to be honest, I'm not 100% sure on that one. But TUI has quite a big program in Bulgaria, and I think there are a couple of new hotels opening on the Romanian Black Sea coast, which I think is quite interesting. I mean, no one's mentioned Albania either. Obviously, it's not a cold destination in any way. But, I think it's just about looking further afield. I think definitely we're seeing readers becoming more comfortable with traveling to these sort of slightly what they might assume are not traditional summer destinations. They do want to find the alternatives. And as I said, I mean, I went to the beach in the Netherlands in July last year. God, it was gorgeous. I mean, it still had that sort of slightly bleak gunmetal sea, and admittedly it was a gorgeous day, but I couldn't believe it. There were sort of like Balinese beach bars everywhere, and it's sort of all the Dutch were like, oh God, honestly, you Brits, you come over and you think this is wonderful, but we've known it forever. So I think it just, we need the people to get on board.
Yeah.
The idea of
sorry, Ben, over to you.
I was just very quickly, the idea of destinations and resorts trying to develop different seasons is not new, of course. I mean, the ski market was such that it could comfortably exist just by offering winter resorts for years and years and years. But for the last 10, 15 years, huge number of resorts in the Alps have opened for summer seasons and kept some lifts up there and tried to develop this new product that they think consumers will like, and it works, and there is increasing uplift to the Alps as a result of that. And we've been publishing stories about why you should spend your time in the Alps in the summer rather than in the winter for years now. I mean, I do think consumer behavior can change quite quickly. But to Cathy's point and to Mark's point, we definitely need an ability to take advantage of it in order to make that happen. I mean, I'm a Peely Wally Scot at heart, and I would much rather not be scalded by July temperatures in the Med. So if, as I say, I wasn't married to a teacher, I would be traveling in September, October, or November as much as possible.
Yeah. And Ben,
can I just add one?
Tom, go ahead.
Just to one thing, which is more general point, which is that as journalists looking for stories, anything that's a change is really beneficial to us, and it's same for sustainability, which might always sound like a downbeat subject, but anything that's changing behavior just gives us something to write about. We can't just keep doing stories about people going to villas in Tuscany, so that whole change of period and destination is hugely welcome to us and gives us a whole nother sort of raft of angles for stories. So the more the better, really.
Yeah, very good point. Very good point. So, Ben, you've said how strong the USA is for the Telegraph. So, Nikki Palmer, acting senior manager at Disney Destinations, says, do you think with cost of living crisis and sustainability, do you think long haul destinations will be affected? So maybe there, Florida and California, do you see trends changing with Telegraph readers at all? I'm not saying you're front of mind for Disney, but
no, well, we are. I think. I mean, I think Disney is a huge destination across all categories in the UK. I mean, I would say it would be naive to think that the cost of living crisis isn't going to affect everyone in some ways, and I think, but it might mean that people go and see Disney and they rent rather than stay in a hotel, or they might go out for fewer restaurant meals, or they might adapt their journey a little bit. But I think if people have been saving up and are looking forward to experiencing Disney or any of the other glories of Florida, they're likely to try and persist with it if they possibly can. There is that sort of old motif, isn't there, that Brits would rather give up anything other than a holiday, and I think that applies to an extent. I just don't think we should be blithe about it. I mean, the people who are speaking today have largely got very affluent audiences who are perhaps less affected, but it still will become a consideration for them, and I don't think we should be unaware of that.
Yeah. Nor will we give up the breakfast or our travel agents. Okay, a little segue to, there was no segue, but to trains. We've got a question on train travel. Obviously, that's been terrifically popular with the media in the last couple of years. Julie Giroux, PR director of MSL, says, PRs are seeing a lot of requests from journalists for destinations accessible by train. While we appreciate sustainability as the driver, how realistic a trend is this growth in train travel, given the amount of time it takes to get to trains, travel by trains? Does anyone have a thought on that? Is train gonna keep growing in importance, or?
Well, I think that yeah, I mean, I went a few weeks ago to Paris for 2 nights and went on the Eurostar. I realized I hadn't actually been on the Eurostar for about 5 years or something, and it was just such a joy. And I kind of realized, well, why don't we do this sort of every month? It wasn't very expensive, and it got to St. Pancras, and it was that whole idea that the journey's part of the holiday and all that. And it was just fabulous getting on the train, and those trains, even if you're not in sort of first class, they come around with the trolley, and it was great. And since then, just to realize that there are more and more ways that you can use the train to get to your destination. I think in Austria, for example, they're putting on a whole new sort of raft of sleeper trains and that sort of thing. Again, it takes longer, obviously, but I think particularly for our readers who do have perhaps more time on their hands than others, I think it's going to be a really expanding market.
Great for itineraries across multiple countries, but Cathy, what do you think about trains as the basis of the annual holiday?
I mean, I think there are probably 2 different groups here that love trains, and Ben has mentioned how affluent most of our audiences are. They fall into the category that have time and money to be able to spend on trains. So you've got those, and then you've got Gen Z, and I haven't actually, we've gone 49 minutes and no one said Gen Z, and that is a word I hear every day in my ear. I'm a geriatric millennial, unfortunately, so I don't qualify. But you've also got these guys who are incredibly aware and want to travel by train and will only travel by train. My old colleague at the Independent, Helen Coffey, she hasn't flown for years and now is using trains as a basis for every holiday she goes on, which I think is incredibly admirable. Could not do it myself. I think what's going to happen in the next 5 years, I went to a really interesting Eurotunnel event last month. Yeah, it was in December. That is still last month. In Calais, and spoke to the CEO of Eurotunnel. They're the guys that obviously operate, or GetLink, sorry, they operate the Channel Tunnel. And, they are saying that they are supercharging their cross-channel train program, whereby they can sign up operators incredibly quickly. They've got rid of some regulation, and therefore other train operators can come to them and say, look, we want to run these cross-channel trains. Because obviously from the UK, everything is routed via France. There's no other way, for it. So I think in the next 5 years, things are going to look incredibly different. And if we do this again, in half a decade's time, we're going to find that trains are the basis for your European summer holiday, at least. But, you know, Europe is just a different market. I mean, go over to America and train travel is almost impossible. You know, we've got that new line in Florida, but it just runs up the side of the highway. I mean, what a boring way to travel. Whereas at least in Europe, you know, the Eurostar, I was on it literally 2 days ago. It's fantastic. And you know what? The cafe there serves much better coffee than in Pret in the station. So anybody traveling, just remember that Cafe Metropolitan is amazing.
But no baked beans.
I do think no baked beans.
Ben.
Have we thought about plum tomatoes at all as an option for breakfast? And
Ben,
I do think I do think it's important. We run the risk here, I think, a little bit of being very London centric. I mean, we're talking about yes, it takes a bit more time to take a train and where, but it's nice to do it. The reason train journeys for British travellers are never going to be anything like as important as aviation is simply because of the access point. You know, if everyone has to get to St Pancras before they get on a train, and they live in Newcastle or they live in Edinburgh or they live anywhere that requires an additional transfer before they get to it, they simply aren't going to take it. So I think the important thing about rail travel is that we remind our audience as much as possible that it's gotten nicer, that it's a better thing to be doing than it was, say, 10 or 15 years ago. That we all talked about all the amazing sleeper services that are coming across Europe. If you've got the opportunity and a bit more time, you should definitely be using rail to get across Europe. But remember that lots and lots of British people don't necessarily have that opportunity.
Yeah,
I think if I can just add on trains at the moment, you know, it's so expensive to. I was looking at doing a ski trip by train, but it was going to cost me £800 a head for every member of my family. And on the direct ski trains, you know, they're very limited capacity, and you sort of get the impression that half of them are journalists on a freebie. So it's a real status symbol there at the moment too. It's sort of like the number of people who are actually taking long haul trains to go on holiday is very small, but from the UK it's a sort of badge of status, and it's a sort of something that people like to discuss in the newspapers, like heat pumps. You know, no one who actually has a heat pump, no one, but that's what everyone writes about. So for the foreseeable future, there's still a great thing for us to write about all the time, but obviously it's going to be a few years before actually it hits the mainstream.
Yeah. So amidst this frenetic conversation, we have a moment's silence thanks to Rose Tai from the Cayman Islands. She asks, silent travel will be a trend in 2024. We actually discussed Robinson Crusoe holidays on our last webinar of last year. Is silent tourism on the up? Do I have a panelist with a view on that?
I would say yes. I mean, it's not going to be a mainstream holiday. It's not going to be much volume in silent travel, but definitely the people are doing retreats. It's part of the whole retreat thing, you know, that everyone is branding what were spa trips and sort of, you know, self-development trips as retreats, and one sort of subsection of that is silent retreats. We've done stories recently. One on going to a French castle, which was a sort of adjunct of the fashion industry, where everyone went after Paris Fashion Week to sit in silence and recover for a weekend, and that was very expensive. And we've also done one in a monastery in Scotland, Pluscarden Abbey, where it's free to go, and it's sort of, you know, the ultimate silent retreat, because you're there with finding out what it's like to be a monk. But anyway, yeah, it's a niche, but it is something that people are looking for, I think. So yeah, maybe some more coverage of it this year.
I think in parallel to what Tom was saying, I think that the whole kind of idea of being somewhere remote, I mean, it's not necessarily silent, there might be people to talk to, but I was hearing yesterday that the figures for this new series by Simon Reeve about wilderness are phenomenal. I mean, people seem to be really loving it. And I think they're loving it because it's taking people into a kind of not a silent world, but a world where there aren't many people, and there's vast sort of landscapes, and nobody's really there. And whether that actually translates into people booking holidays, I'm not sure. But certainly I think it's something which is really on people's radar now.
Yeah. Actually, Mark, I'll stick with you. We've got a question from Phil Bloomfield. Phil, great to have you back with us in these webinars. Phil of Ready to Bloom. He says, lots of industry talk about best ever, biggest ever, but the real bellwether of industry confidence is spend on marketing and advertising. And are your commercial, partnership teams seeing increases in revenues and the creation of commercial partnerships? Mark, you mentioned online. Do you have a view? How are things looking commercially in the industry? Do you feel, the media industry? No pressure.
Well, I think it's very difficult, and I think we touched on how social media is very much coming onto our turf, if you like, and so everybody's sort of fighting for every last sort of penny, really.
Yeah.
And we are, I think Cathy was mentioning about video and everything else, and we're going down that road in a big way, and coming up with, I was talking to our advertising people yesterday, with different cruise lines where we kind of enter into a whole kind of video partnerships and things like that. So it's definitely the future. I mean, it's all part of just the digital world in which we live, and we just got to adapt. And I think the Mail, perhaps we're adapting a bit after the event, perhaps, but we'll be sort of trying to catch up, I guess, as best we can. I mean, what's weird is that Mail Online is such a huge success, and it's now been decided that we've got to monetize that. But it'd be very interesting to see how that actually works.
Yeah. Cass Helstrick asks about data capture, competition ops. Mark, who at the Mail would you go to for that op? And I'm going to ask the other three of you to tell us.
Sorry, can you repeat that?
Yeah, if you for digital stories, and especially competition with data capture for the media title and the brand, who do we go to? And if I could quickly go through all of you, that would be great. Maybe starting with you, Mark.
Well, I think you come to me and I'll find the right person to hand it on to.
Thank you. Cathy?
A woman called Flora Cuff. She's our travel marketing manager.
Could I have her surname again?
It's Cuff, as in Cuff.
Got it. Thank you. And Tom?
Yeah, me. Not that we've really do much in that sphere, but always interested to hear.
Yeah. And Ben?
Me as well.
Okay, fantastic. That is terrific. So many questions to get through. Do the panelists need to come to a halt at one, in which case we will, or are you happy to travel on a few more minutes?
I don't mind going on a bit more.
Okay, just maybe 5 more minutes. We've got next question. Rebecca Lowe talks about original travel. Do you have any thoughts about people taking kids out of school term times and pitching that to your readers as an option? Also, she says, do you have destinations that you wish freelancers would pitch more often? So if you feel like tackling either of those, maybe Ben on destinations. And
well, I was going to talk about school holidays, actually. I mean, we've written a lot about it over the past year, in that sort of lifestyle frame where people have to acknowledge that the truth of the matter is that a holiday in a school during a school holiday is extraordinarily expensive compared to the week before or the week after. Yeah. And it's been interesting that fundamentally our readership seems to be fairly gung-ho about doing it. We've written stories where they've been perfectly happy to be photographed and say, I'm going to do it this way, and that's how it works. It's obviously something that you can be fined for as a parent. I think truthfully the answer from all our points of view is to introduce staggered school holidays in the UK, and everything can be slightly marginally more affordable for everybody. So maybe that's a campaign for all of us to get behind and make that happen. But we certainly, it's absolutely something we cover. But obviously, fundamentally, parents are not really allowed to do that. They run the risk of being fined if they take their children outside of school holidays. That doesn't mean they don't do it, and it doesn't mean we don't often raise it as a topic. But it's more of an opinion-led thing. And then in terms of destinations that I wish we heard more about, I mean, I think we've got very good communications with our PLs and freelancers, and I do genuinely think that we cover off particularly the key stuff. Tom mentioned earlier that one of the things he's after is different ways of doing effectively old favourites, and I suspect that will chime with all of us here. Whether it's Britain or Italy or Spain or anywhere else, I just want to hear different aspects, different ways of doing it. I often feel that Scandinavia in general could have more traction with all readers. That all of Scandinavia are places that I spent my childhood going to, and I genuinely would love to be able to write more about Denmark, Sweden, or Norway, or Finland. So any good stories there would be great.
Terrific. And we had Steve Robertshaw, Senior PR Manager of Visit Sweden, join us. He did have a question, but it's in the whole sustainability mix, and I feel we've moved on. But thank you for your question, Steve. Cathy, any destinations that you wish freelancers harangued you with more often?
I mean, I was going to say Scandinavia as well. And the other one that is always intriguingly popular for us is Malta. And we don't hear enough about Malta. Mexico, also, I feel like there's a lot going on in Mexico. It's a popular destination, but equally, we don't sort of cover it beyond Cancun, Tulum. I don't hear a huge amount about that. That's probably it, got to say. I mean, I will also say we run a lot of stories about Southern Africa, and I always joke that the number of pieces we run on Southern Africa, Tanzania, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, lots of safari content going on, is vastly disproportionate to the number of people actually traveling there. So very similar. I want to hear new things about old destinations or traditional destinations.
Perfect. Tom?
Yeah, we sorry, I was just going to say that it's a bit like safaris. I mean, safaris are so unbelievably expensive, and I'm not sure how many of our readers actually, afford to go on a safari. But we seem to run a lot of safari pieces one way or another. But I think what's interesting, we had a really good response when one of our freelancers went with her family, but they were volunteers, and so they worked at this safari place for a week or two. And actually, that was a really interesting take on it, because it hardly cost them nothing, really, very much. They had to get there. But it was a way that they could see all the animals, without paying such a huge price.
I'd say, just on going back to the school holidays thing, it's a bit too UK centric for me to cover, given that most of our readers are outside the UK. But it's like everything, it's an issue, and that means that gives us traction for an angle to write stories about. So we've written about skiing in parts of Europe where the peaks of demand are driven by Bavarian school holidays rather than UK school holidays. So, like, if you go to Kitzbühel in Austria rather than the French Alps, you go in the UK half term in February, it's not a peak season, because the important market for them is Munich. So there's definitely stories to do on that. In terms of destination, the one I'm embarrassed to say I don't run enough about is North America, and especially because we've got a huge office there, and a third of our readers are in America. So, but I don't seem to get very many sort of interesting pitches, again, beyond the super well-known stuff. So always interested to hear more from America.
Yeah. Can I just jump in and also say, sorry, American readers, just jolted my thoughts into action, also very important for us as well. So yeah, North America, although I feel like we do cover North America a lot, and I hear a lot about America, but just to add.
Brilliant. That actually neatly answers Surinder Manku's question, which was USA ? So well done, Surinder. That's brilliant. Sticking with you, Cathy, Claire Roadley of Umingo PR, a great safari and Africa specialist. Back to sustainability. Are you happy to commission stories that showcase more than luxury and actually look at the community and conservation projects?
Yes, of course. But Tom sort of encapsulated it earlier. I think it was a Torop quote. They just fall very flat with readers, honestly. It's all, and it can't be done in a worthy way. I think it's always trying to find a sort of an almost kind of quite a light-hearted, fun, normal person way of talking about community projects in Africa, because that headline immediately is going to switch a lot of people off. So it's case by case, and it would depend what it was. I'm sorry, that's such a bad answer. Sorry, Claire.
No, that's absolutely great.
Can I just make a point about sustainability and touching on what Cathy was saying? I was thinking actually last night, would I prefer to spend a weekend with an eco zealot or a you know a sort of denier, a sort of climate change denier? And I realized that both would be equally tedious. And I think that most readers of the Mail, of the FT, the Times, Telegraph, actually are fully aware of the whole, how wonderful it is to be on the side of sustainability, but they just don't want to have it, shoved down their throat all the time. It's like still those annoying cards you get in a hotel reminding you about the eco credentials of the hotel and to use your towel as much as possible. We know all that, and I think that it's a really dull subject now, because most people are responsible enough. It's fantastic if they're on a holiday and there's a whole kind of sustainability benefit, but that's great. But I think in terms of selling a story, it just on that is very tired now.
Very good. Well, look, I think we probably need to wrap for the sanity of our panelists. Esther Bell says the appetite for TV travel program seems to be increasing. Will any of our editors here be on a program soon? Is that Love Island? Or should we try and sell this webinar to Netflix? Any thoughts on TV travel?
TV travel is great. And anything that makes people want to travel more,
I think it's time we saw you in front of camera, Ben.
I am in front of a camera. Look at me.
Simon Reeve, of course, started in the Sunday Times Post room.
Yes,
Cathy. So you should own that.
I did not know that. Okay, good. Thank you, Tom.
I am so sorry to all of those whose questions I haven't had a chance to get to, but there will be many, many more opportunities, and we are so grateful to you all for having tuned in. I think I've enjoyed this more than any webinar we've ever done. So to Ben Ross, Cathy Adams, Mark Palmer and Tom Robbins, thank you so much for your insights. It's been a wonderful hour. And to you, our audience, thank you so much for joining. We will see you at IMM in February. It's going to be massive. I'm Henry Hemming. Thank you so much for joining us today. Cheers.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.